I'm here today with Hanna Bier. Hanna, you are a money coach, and specifically, you have a process that you refer to as money bliss, which we're going to hear all about today. But your original background was actually as an energy coach. And so, one of the things that I'm really curious to hear about from you is how these things are related. So, really excited to hear your story. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Dawn.
Thanks. Okay, so tell us, Hannah, how did you one become an energy coach and like how energy healer, energy coach, whatever the right word is in your world, and then tell us how that opened your eyes to this connection between energy and financial well-being.
Yeah, so in my early 20s, I didn't know what to do with my life. And like so many people, I just decided to go to university. I studied fashion and I thought, maybe one day I might want to be a business owner. And so I didn't know what business to start. And I thought, maybe something related to fashion and clothes. And so I went to school, but I found myself feeling really, really tired. I had adrenal fatigue, I had CPTSD symptoms, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And so I had a really hard time to even attend my classes, to go take my tests. It just really felt like a train had hit me. Like I couldn't get out of bed. And it was really terrifying for me because I was at the beginning of my life. All of my friends were landing these really cool internships and they were able to study. And it just felt like my brain fog and the lead in my bones. I couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't even function or walk down the road to get groceries from the store. And it really freaked me out. And at that time, I had already tried therapy and it hadn't really helped to the extent that I really needed. And so I discovered the self development world and self healing. And I first discovered the word psychic. And when I first heard it, I was like, well, that's not what I have, because what I have is really, it's real, it's very tangible. All my life, I've always been able to see energy. So when I look at a person, I see like colors around them. I've always been talking to animals and like the fly on the wall and traveling forwards and backwards in time. And so I started teaching yoga and my students started asking me questions and I was able to read their energy field. I was able to say, hey, this thing happened around the age of 7 related to your dad. It's sitting in your tummy. Do you happen to have any tummy issues? And like, oh my God, yes. And like all the emotional baggage that we store in our bodies, I was able to see and kind of point out for people. But at that point, I had no idea what to do with it. And so I kind of stumbled into this line of work of using my perceptual skills in order to not just see what's there and see what's blocking a person, but also be able to clear it out.
That's such a remarkable journey. And all of this started when you had a bit of a health crash, right? You said you had adrenal fatigue, brain fog, chronic fatigue. As you tapped more into these energy fields, did your symptoms resolve?
They actually did. Yeah. I just turned into an energizer bunny, but the process took a lot of work. I had so much stuff, not just my own stuff, but transgenerational stuff, just a lot of stuff. It always felt like, my entire life I've always been told, oh, you're so mature. You're such an old soul. I'm like, it's just a lot of stuff that I'm carrying around with myself, and it just felt so incredibly heavy. And so I I discovered this modality where you allow in a really beautiful healing cleansing light. And then I would read myself and I would allow the light to go where all the trauma sits, where all the tension sits, where all the heaviness sits, where all the pain sits, and all the sadness. And I would just, for years, I didn't know what else to do with my life because I was just bedridden and so tired. And so I really actually didn't have anything better to do, but just to do energy work on myself. And before I knew it, I had clients, I had a business, and it got really successful. And so as I was healing myself, I was healing others. And that's when the money piece came in, because I called myself an emotional healing coach. I was an energy healer. I told people I can help you get rid of your trauma, get rid of your emotional baggage, and just feel light and free. And like you can live, so yeah, like you can start your life from the moment now, not from like years ago or decades ago or generations past ago, but really give you a fresh start in your life today. And then my clients started getting all of these money side effects. And I did not
Tell
think that
us
those were related.
tell us more about this connection between the energetic flow in a person's life and then the financial flow in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. So money really is a version of love for me. Like love in the form of money is one of the most nourishing things that exist on planet Earth. So when we're little, our parents are supposed to love us and care for us and meet our needs and help us navigate the world so that we grow up into capable adults. And then later on, we're supposed to use money in order to care for ourselves, in order to have a wonderful home, and in order to give back to the community by sharing our gifts and receiving money in return. And putting food on the table. So money really is an expression of love. And so when we're little and our parents don't really love us and provide for us in the way that we needed, we often grow up feeling like there's never enough love, or love isn't dependable, or love is this roller coaster, or love is something that always comes with a catch. And then the way it becomes very apparent that the way that we experience love as children are in a relationship with our parents and our main caretakers is being mirrored in a relationship with money later on. I didn't know that at the time, though, of working with my clients. I just thought, oh, good for you. You're making a ton of money. Money is falling into your lap. That's great. Good for you. But at first, I didn't know or didn't think at all that that was related to the energy work that we were doing.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And okay, so you mentioned to me once that as money stress resolves, right? And it's really making sense based on what you're telling me, but I want to hear more about this idea that as as money stress resolves, then the biochemistry of stress in the body resolves. And you've mentioned to me that as people go through this process, you notice their bodies change, their energy, like their physical energy, not other kinds of energy, shift. And that their emotional state changes. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about this connection between the emotional energy, this experience of love, and then financial flow, and then how that manifests in terms of mental, emotional, and physical vitality.
Oh, yeah. I feel like all of us have personal examples of this in our own lives. It always felt to me like anytime I looked at my bank account or anytime I engaged with money, it just felt like somebody punched me in the gut. It always felt like, ugh. It was always a reminder of the fact that I didn't feel capable, I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel worthy, I felt overwhelmed. And so for me, those interactions with money very physically felt like a punch in the gut. And we've all heard the stories of people developing ulcers because of their money worries. And that's just a little anecdotal thing that all of us have come across. But many of my clients, they come and they're sitting like this. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a chiropractor, but I can see that that's probably not very comfortable. From an energetic perspective, I can read and I can see, what's sitting here. What are the burdens people are carrying in their shoulders? Like the body is the map that tells me where we need to go in order to release all of those blockages. And I think it's actually maybe a blessing that I don't have a medical background at all. I really don't actually, I don't know. I just read the body and the body tells me what's going on. Where does everything sit? And then it always correlates with some aches and pains that my clients are having, or especially when there's unresolved medical issues where no expert seems to know what's going on. It is often emotion that's sitting in the body. And until that emotion is accessed and loved and allowed to gently release, is the body able to come back into a really harmonious state. And what's fascinating to me is that the body always knows what it really wants to feel like, what it really wants to move like, what it really wants to look like, what it wants to do. So I always tell my clients, let's just clear all the energy and then let's just observe what your body chooses to do. And you will be surprised at the wonderful kind of harmony it will click into.
So, a woman named Susan Stone is another person that I interviewed in the series, and she works a lot with energy medicine. Something that I've heard her say, which I hear resonating in what you're describing, is that one, illness is the path to perfection. Right? Like she talks about this idea that these things we think of as symptoms are really just showing us where there is, to love, embrace, resolve, or to sort of it's like an indication of where you're seeing yourself as separate from divine flow so that you can come back into a right relationship with health. And it sounds like there's a lot of parallel thinking in that. But what I hear in what you're saying is, in a sense, love is the answer, right? And that as we can embrace and love these aspects of ourselves, then the body will naturally take its vital state because vitality is the natural state of the body.
It is. And it's so fun and interesting to see what each individual body does. Many of my clients come to me and they're so convinced they need to lose weight or they need to gain weight or they need to be more energetic, less energetic. And they have like very specific ideas of what that is. But once the body really is in its, harmonious state and harmony or perfection, it is a feeling of click for me. It's a feeling of just right. It has nothing to do with our actual physical, constitution. Like we could be in a wheelchair and be in perfect physical health. We can be, having autoimmune diseases and we could be in a state of perfect physical health. It's just when life force energy and love is flowing freely through your body and your body is able to transform into what it feels most comfortable being in this very moment based on your soul journey. And so it's just really, it's lovely to go from needing to force our bodies into anything that we think they need to be, but just allowing them to kind of unfold in whichever way makes most sense.
So, what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that there's a trust that's necessary in the process. Like, allow your body to do what this soul journey has called you toward.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Is that what?
And that's a perfect mirror to how money is asking for a sense of trust too. Like money is asking that we let it flow. Money is asking that we let it, you know, go out, sometimes, go out a little more and sometimes flow back a little more. And sometimes, have like some silly numbers and sometimes some beautiful numbers. Money is a natural resource, just like the energy of our body. And as such, it is allowed to flow. And so many of us who feel really scared around our bodies or scared around money, it's often like the same lesson that needs to be learned that then, unlocks like transformation in so many different areas of our lives. And we might be really surprised, I don't advertise my work as, and your body's going to feel better, or you're going to need to stop, you don't have to do Botox anymore. You're going to look like 15 years younger as a result of this work. I don't advertise it like that. And yet, it's interesting how when we work on your money and we clear all this emotional baggage, how other areas of your life just click into place because it's the same request being made by the different construction zones of your life.
Oh, I love hearing that. Hannah, you also work with a modality referred to as family constellations therapy, right? Therapy, theory. You tell us, what is family constellations work? And then how does it connect to these other pieces of, physical and emotional well-being, financial well-being, and other aspects of well-being in our life?
Yeah. Feels like in our Western culture, we often pretend to be so individualistic. We pretend that if we make a decision, we can just follow through and create anything that we want. We're so much more than just ourselves. And our most important home is our family of origin. But so many of us have experienced really, really, really difficult things, myself included. Like some of the worst things that can happen to a person who grew up in like an industrialized country have happened and they have happened in the lives of my clients. And so part of the emotional healing work that we're doing around money, will bring up some difficult experiences that you've had in the past. And so in order to heal and release those, we use family constellation therapy. What I love about it is that we talk about all the things that nobody dares to talk about. And it's really effective in releasing trauma and difficult feelings around things like incest and gigantic betrayal in the family and dramatic deaths and murder and suicides and all those things that, many of us don't have the tools to address, but that are like kind of the elephant in the room, you know? We often feel like my clients always come to me and they're like, yeah, but I'm meditating and I'm doing yoga. And I'm like, yeah, but I need time when we talk about your parents. You just want to sink into the floor. It's like
Yeah.
we want to, it is the absolute foundation of who we are. It is the soil on which we build the house that is our life. And so, in order for your money to flow, we need to make sure that your family of origin is in flow.
So you mentioned these big things that are virtually impossible to deal with modality like talk therapy. But if I understand correctly, family constellations is also really useful, for what might be referred to as like little t trauma, like not these massive events that we sort of know have created an experience of crisis in our life. But even things like, if you were always told to finish everything on your plate because, your parents grew up in the era, or your grandparents grew up in the era of the Great Depression and have this like, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. So do you find that family constellations is useful for the sort of more subtle patterns as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I love about family constellation therapy is that as much as it's a healing modality, and it's like a chiropractic adjustment for your family system. And so it's like everything that is out of place moves back to where it belongs. Like your mom begins to be more like a mom again, your dad gets to be dad, and you get to be the child, and your children get to be children. And it's almost like we put everything in its rightful place. Usually when people start working with me, their family of origin is a really messy house with like furniture all over the place. We just create order so that every person has space to breathe and gets enough love and life force energy. And then people's behavior begins to change. And by the way, we do this without talking to anybody. Like all we need is you, because your energy alone is enough to influence your entire family system. But it's also a philosophic healing modality. And there are some core principles that we work with. And in your example, one of the core principles is that the younger generations, our duty is to do life a little better and a little differently than our parents. And the best parts of our parents would want us to surpass them. And their souls actually encourage us to expand on what they've already built. So when somebody stays in line with their family of origin in ways that are destructive to their life, it means that there's some unresolved, usually hierarchical kind of, it's a family order kind of issue. Because once everyone's in the right place, you get so much support and so much love from the best core parts of your parents that you are able to do the sacred work of, doing life a little better and a little differently. And then we're not caught in the negative patterns at all anymore. Then our parents can be crazy and they can say rude stuff, but it doesn't affect us at all.
Yeah, I love that. They get to keep being them and you get to be okay.
That's exactly it.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I'm curious about is, again, like when we talked before, you told me about this idea that when people do this sort of deeper energy work, one of the things that they experience is deep safety within themselves, and that allows for what you described as like ease in receiving. And one of the things that I'm curious about is one, is that accurate? Did we get that? Did I get that right? And if there's a connection that you see in the energy work, especially for women, around the capacity to receive versus being caught in the do, force, achieve kind of modes of life.
Yeah, for many of us, it feels so much safer to give because in order to receive, we have to be a little mushy. We have to let our armor break down a little bit. Often when we do energy clearings, my clients will say, "Oh, I feel so tired," or "Oh, I feel I feel so emotional." And I always tell them, you know, like, let's just be inquisitive about this for a moment and see if maybe you're just becoming a better receiver. Because if you feel yourself being a little more mushy, but more money is flowing in and clients are saying yes more easily, and you're being offered promotions, and you're making a greater profit and your investments are growing, then maybe this is just a new feeling to get used to. Maybe being a little bit softer means that you're a better receiver. But for many of us, this is a very unfamiliar feeling. And so the thing that you touched on in your question was, once we source our safety from within ourselves versus from the outside world, does that make us better receivers? And I would say absolutely, yes. If you can equip yourself with amazing tools and resources around money, if you can learn that you're an amazing money maker, the world is filled with money making opportunities, you know exactly how to be around people and help people and be useful, and exactly how to be an amazing receiver, then you will always be the kind of personality that's going to thrive in any environment. Whatever life will bring your way, you're always going to be able to thrive and make a really wonderful living. And so that's something that I love most about my work, is that yes, we make you a ton of money, and like the financial outcomes, like they're so much fun. And who you're becoming in the process is even more valuable, because once you can trust yourself to take care of yourself financially, no matter what, and I mean, no matter what, like no matter what, like in any circumstance, there are always people who thrive financially. If you can know without a shadow of a doubt that that is you, then the safety really comes from within you. And then you don't have to grasp for external things in order to give you a false sense of safety.
Wow, that's so fantastic. Again, like connecting this to the idea of physical vitality, I think it's arguable that safety is or the experience of safety is the key to vitality, to health. Your metabolism has a hard time flowing when we're in this lockdown mode. Um, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like we've kind of covered some of these ideas around, family traumas and belief systems. What do you see around just like these broader cultural messages around going all the time, doing all the time, and the way that that impacts our energetic flow and then whether that's turns into financial flow or physical health. Just curious like about the impact of the subtle messages, that the ones we just kind of swim in and might not even know are there.
Yeah, I just talked with a client recently, and she really feels like she was sold into the lie that the more she works and the better she performs and the more perfect she is, the more her financial abundance will be guaranteed. She grew up in a teacher family. She's a little workhorse. She's very dedicated. She's very responsible, and we all love that about her. And yet she always has this voice in her head that says, if you just perfect this and you perfect that and you never make mistakes and everything is on point, everything is perfect, then nothing bad will ever happen and everything will always be good, and you will receive the love and the acknowledgement that you've always wanted. And I feel like so many of us grew up with this messaging of, if we please the teacher and please our parents and please our boss and please the world, if we look just right and talk just right and behave ourselves just right, then our survival will be guaranteed. And then we become adults. Some of us realize it in our 20s, some in our 30s, some in our 40s, some in our 50s. But for many of us, our eyes fly open and we're like, oh no, I really was sold this lie, and it's not true. And then it's really difficult for us to unlearn this rigidity and kind of, try on a different approach, which is, maybe it's safe, right, and good to be paid just for me, just for being me. Maybe I can get paid, not for doing anything specific. Maybe just my mere presence on the planet is so wonderful and healing and nourishing for everybody that I just get to be paid just for that. Maybe who I've become is an amazing asset, and that is something that I can get paid for. Maybe I get to just exist in financial abundance just for the joy of it. And so we kind of take this condition out of money that says only when you're perfect, only when you're working hard enough, only when you never make mistakes are you allowed to feel safe and well.
That's fantastic. And then, Hannah, what I'm curious about, because you just talked about joy and the pleasure of being yourself, and that, that can be enough. Our central theme is that you cannot hate yourself into happiness and health, and that any sustainable path to vitality must be pleasurable. So, can you connect for us these ideas of pleasure and joy, to the emotional healing and the access to all sorts of flow that we're talking about?
Yeah. I discovered this for myself when I just started trying to heal my emotional body. And the goal for me wasn't to feel blissful. It wasn't to feel happy. It wasn't to feel joyful. I just didn't want to be in excruciating pain and emotional suffering all the time. I didn't think that a person like me could ever feel good. I hadn't experienced that before. So I didn't really have an idea. I remember working with this therapist once, and she said to me, oh, everything's going to be all right again. And I looked at her and I thought to myself, I don't have a reference point. Like, I don't have a reference point of ever having been okay. So my goal was never emotional bliss. And yet I just kept on clearing and clearing and clearing anything that felt heavy, anything that felt constricting, anything that felt just tight and uncomfortable in my body, like any idea, any point of view, any message that it had ever internalized and begun to live that just didn't feel light in my body. I just, removed all of it. And then all that was left was bliss. Like it was ecstasy. It was absolute, it's what the sages talk about, and it's amazing how that is our natural state, overflowing abundance just is our natural state. And I kind of discovered it by chance. I wasn't going for it. And it just happened. And so I would tell my clients, just clear yourself out enough and you will never have to meditate a day in your life again. You will just wake up in the morning exploding with joy and happiness. And so it's all those places inside of us that hold wrong ideas and wrong messages about life that get in the way of us just being in our true expression, which is absolute rapture. And with that being said, to me, emotions are two layers. So there's like the deeper emotional layer, it's like the bass note, and so my bass note was always fear, like absolute just fear. It was like a deer in headlights for most of my life, just like so scared. That was my baseline note. And now my baseline note is bliss. Whether I'm like in labor with my daughter, getting a C-section, bliss. Being in a car crash, bliss. Like it does, like nothing can happen to me. And this baseline note of bliss carries me through. But on the surface, I might still experience anger, when I'm crossing a boundary of myself or when somebody else is crossing a boundary, or I might still feel sad. There's emotion bubbling up that wants to be released, or I might still feel confusion when I don't have enough information, need to research a little bit more. And so the baseline note is something that just will become so delicious that you even then enjoy the mundane kind of kaleidoscope of feelings in a really different way.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And then, okay, so Hannah, you have this unique gift. You see energy. You can move energy out of your own body and others. For somebody who is listening or watching right now, I can imagine that there's almost a sense of like overwhelm. Like, where would I even begin, right? If I'm stuck down at the bottom, if I'm, in fight or flight, if my life feels overwhelming, if it's kind of hopeless, what can people do as a starting point to begin to release some of those patterns and then move toward and ultimately into this state of bliss?
Yeah, a very simple thing that you can do is you can just feel into the part of your body where the heaviness sits. To me, it always just feels like a heavy kind of little bit of mud. like where the mud sits. Kind of look for where the mud sits. Does it sit in your lower back? Does it sit in one of your shoulders? Does it sit behind your ear? Where does it sit? I'm just kind of tuning into the energy of everybody who's listening to this interview, like in all of your bodies, like it's just kind of lighting up where the mud sits. So you know where the mud sits. And then just take your attention up. And you can do this with your eyes open and travel to the center of the universe. Find a gorgeous, healing, expansive, unconditionally loving light, and just allow this light to flow down into your body, into the place where the heaviness sits, and just begin to wash it away. You can breathe deeply and just allow it to wash away. So trying harder isn't going to make it work any better. So you just need to let it happen. And then after some time, you're going to feel it lift. So this one moment of doing a tiny, tiny energy clearing, might make you feel a lot better for the rest of the day, but it may not fix your entire life, because there might be layers upon layers upon layers of pain sitting inside of you, a lot of which you maybe haven't even accessed yourself yet. Maybe a lot of it you were already born with. Maybe that was already wired into your body when you were in utero in your mom. It doesn't mean that that's harder to clear. I'm just saying that there might be more to clear. And so if you're really committed to being like free and happy and light and vibrant, and you feel all this heaviness, then this is something to begin doing every single day. And there's actually I have a 10-minute wealth creation ritual that teaches some of the energy clearing tools that I'm using. So if you just want to start in your own living room and just, learn some tools, and that is a really great place to start.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for guiding us through that. It really demonstrates how simple and straightforward it can be. Um, okay, so the other thing that I want to ask you about is knowing yourself as capable and the capacity to be proactive, right? So far we've talked so much about this energy spectrum. One of the things that I really like about what you do and what you offer is that I've never heard you say it's only about the energy, right? Like that you could just sit cross-legged, in the comfort of your own home, never take new action, and then have, abundance reign on you. And we see the same things in health and wellness, where there's a mindset, there's an emotional pattern, and achieving change is connected to taking different action in the world. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what it means to be aligned with the action that actually changes your life, and how you support people in the daily activities of showing up differently.
Yeah, over the course of the many years of being a business owner, I've worked with, probably thousands and thousands of people across the world. And I've just it's almost like a little collection of best practices that I've assembled. And even before my Money Bliss business came to be, I just used them in my own business, like best practices, just for how to organize your personal finances, how to organize your business finances, how to market, how to sell, how to run your business, and how to make sure that your money continuously grows and grows and grows. I also have recipes on how to invest your money if you're extremely risk averse like me. Like I like zero risk, like none. Financial advisors always ask, how much risk? And I'm like, zero, none at all. This might change about me, but right now I'm like extremely risk averse. And so I just kind of came across all of these different recipes. And so often my clients, when they first come to me, they often have ideas like, I'm a bad business owner, I'm a bad marketer, I am bad at sales, or sales sucks, it's not fun, it's screwing people over, it's being dishonest. They have all these ideas. And I don't even feel like they're deep-rooted beliefs. I just think that they're placeholders for skills. What they're lacking are skills and recipes, really. And so I just give them the recipe before they even do a lot of energy work with me, and the recipe begins to work. So somebody who believes that they're terrible at baking, if they get a recipe on how to make chocolate cookies and they get their ingredients and they're just being guided through how to make them, then even though they hold the belief that they can't bake good cookies, they will still have cookies in the end, you know? And so for anybody listening who might hold similar ideas about themselves, you know, might you just be lacking a recipe? Maybe you just don't have a plan. Maybe you just don't have a path. Maybe you just don't have a best practice on how to get the outcome you want. And so we still want to clear the emotional baggage, but we can already set you up with all those recipes from the start. You know, many of my clients, when they start working with me, they enroll their first 10 clients for their new business within the first week, or, you know, double their income within 2 weeks, or reach 10K for the first time in their entire lives within, you know, 14 days. You know, and that's not witchcraft. It's just that they finally have a recipe and they just follow the recipe and, you know, all is well.
Yeah, I love it. It's not witchcraft at all. But there really is this complementary relationship, right, between the emotional states, what we're holding on to, and then that capacity to do differently. I find in all areas of life, but gosh, it really shows up in health and wellness that the human nervous system feels comfortable and safe when something is familiar. And so just that willingness to show up differently, to take an action that you've never taken before, to follow somebody's recipe when it's a little unfamiliar to you can really we stop ourselves, right? And so then what you've really laid out today is that you can move through some of the limiting beliefs and the emotional patterns that lead us to feel uncomfortable, right? We're then resourcing safety from the inside, trusting ourselves, trusting our capacity. And then that opens the door to like do the different thing. I love the analogy of the recipe, right? Because we work with food and movement so often. And a lot of times it's not that mysterious. It just takes, trust in yourself and then willingness to do something maybe that you've never done before. Y-
Yeah, and it helps to have somebody by your side who's taking you by the hand, who's like breathing with you and saying, yes, this feels uncomfortable. And it's safer and good to try something new. It's safer and good to implement this, you know, and then when a really cool result shows up, to kind of breathe and acclimate, you know. Um, for me, when I first started really making strides with my money, I needed to go so slow. You know, I needed to, anytime I had a big money win, I just needed to kind of acclimate. I needed to breathe and just get used to this feeling because it was so unfamiliar for me. Like I had never had savings. I had never had, you know, that level of success in my business. I'd never had that many clients. I'd never had that much free time, you know, that much ease, you know, that much, you know, hope for my future. And so I needed to just kind of breathe into all of those new feelings and acclimate to them. And so at that time, I also felt like in so many other money coaching modalities, there's always the earn more, do more, sell more, enroll more. We don't have this moment to catch your breath and be like, this is safe. I'm really enjoying this. This is fun. My heart is beating. And, you know, I'm still alive. Like this is, you know, to just kind of let ourselves acclimate for a moment, you know. And so I'm just sharing this in case anybody else, you know, sometimes feels like they're not growing quickly enough. um you know, and like it's not the rate of growth, it's not how fast you grow. It's like, are you allowing yourself to grow and then acclimate and then grow and then acclimate and then grow and then acclimate, and this way you're not going to slide back, you know, so easily anymore.
That's wonderful. Hannah, as we come to a close, is there anything else that you would love to add to this conversation around pleasure, dropping this old message around hating yourself, thinking that, like, okay, if I just beat myself up enough, I'll create change in my life, or around the connection between financial flow and physical well being?
Yeah, I would love to say, dear listener, dear audience, that those money desires that have been floating around you, kind of tapping on your shoulders and whispering in your ears and nudging you to listen to this interview, um, that's not a coincidence. They chose you for a reason. And it may seem really magical or like it's just going to be, way out in the future, if at all. Just trust it and walk down this path. Because you may think that you're going to get amazing success and amazing money and amazing financial outcomes, but you're going to get so much more along the way. So trust it and just start walking in that direction. And from someone who's been in your shoes, who's been like so absolutely terrified before and did it anyway, it really ends up being worth it in the end. It's so much fun when you go on vacation whenever you want, but you can be home with your kids. Dawn knows that I was just so sick this weekend. And it's so nice to not feel stressed. You just stay in bed for as long as you need, and this time spaciousness, this emotional spaciousness, this financial spaciousness, and this ability to do what feels most congruent and to live a life that's true to you is an incredible gift. And it's not a luxury. It really is something that is accessible to you. And it's probably already calling you in some way. So trust it, trust it, trust it.
Well, Hannah, I love that. It is not a luxury to live a life that is congruent with you. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience, and the beautiful perspective on flow and abundance.
Thanks so much for having me.